Now to those overnight election results we mentioned. There were some big winners in Florida, New York, and Oklahoma on Tuesday, and we are shaping up for a November general election that is going to have the eyes of the nation on it. So let's start in Florida, where U.S. Representative Charlie Crist won the Democratic nomination for governor. He won it pretty handily, too, over Nikki Fried, who was the state's agriculture commissioner. 59% of the vote to Crist, and he will now face off with incumbent Governor Ron DeSantis. In the race for U.S. Senate, U.S. Representative Val Demings won the Democratic nomination easily, 84% of the vote to her. That sets up a challenge against Republican incumbent Senator Marco Rubio. In New York, Democrats picked Jerry Nadler over Carolyn Maloney in the House race for U.S. District 12. Both have been in Congress for 30 years in neighboring districts, but they ran against each other this year after the state's redistricting efforts combined their districts. Our Joe Khalil has more on the key takeaways from Tuesday's primaries. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Mitch. It's pretty amazing that even this late in the primary season, we're still getting not just really competitive primaries, but really interesting ones and crucial ones moving forward. So let's start with the ones that you mentioned. You talk about Charlie Crist now in Florida. He is now going to be the Democrat who's going to try to unseat Governor Ron DeSantis. And look, it's not going to be easy for Democrats to win that race. As we know, when we've been reporting, Governor DeSantis is sort of a rising star in the Republican Party. He's got a national profile. People consider Florida a purple state, but really it's a red-leaning state these days. They have something like 200,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats. So for Crist, he is a popular name in Florida. He's been around Florida politics for quite some time, a former governor there himself when he was a Republican, now a Democrat. The fact that he was a Republican, I think sort of Democrats are hoping can appeal to, some independents and maybe pick off some Republicans who may not be happy with the DeSantis wing of the party. But still, they have their guy now, Charlie Crist. It should be a competitive race in November, but one that may be an uphill battle for Democrats. On to the Senate now. Val Demings, again, she won her primary last night pretty easily. She has been running as Sheriff Demings. That was her title before she ended up as a member of Congress. Democrats are hopeful. A couple of months ago, this seemed to be a race that was out of reach for Democrats, but we've seen the national momentum, especially in these Senate races, sort of shifting slowly toward Democrats' favor in a lot of the battleground states. And Demings certainly has a chance. Marco Rubio is favored to keep his seat, but anything can happen, especially again as the national conversation and momentum may be shifting. So that's going to be another interesting one to watch, and Democrats hoping they can pick it off. Republicans think that they will keep that seat, but it'll be a close one in November. Let's switch over to New York now. You talked about the Jerry Nadler, Carolyn Maloney race. I think one of the more interesting races in the entire country, primary-wise, just because these are two people who are institutions when it comes to House Democrats. As you mentioned, 30 years both of them individually have in Congress. And when redistricting shook this up and combined both of their districts into one, each one of them could have made a decision to run in a neighboring district or somewhere else. They decided, both of them, they were going to stay in this district and run against each other. And look, they've been longtime allies, partners in New York from Manhattan, but this race got pretty ugly. You had the Maloney campaign saying things about Nadler like he wasn't up for the job physically, and spreading what was an unsubstantiated claim that he had even collapsed at one point. It got ugly. Ultimately, Nadler ended up winning the race pretty handily, but certainly an interesting one to see. Guys, I want to just touch on one more race if we could, because it is a big deal. This is New York's 19th district. This is a special election to replace a member of Congress who's no longer going to be serving in Congress. And the Democrat there, Pat Ryan, ended up winning against the GOP candidate, Mark Molinaro. The reason that was a really important one was because it was a battleground district. It's a purple district, and really one of the biggest indicators that both parties were looking at to see this is a bellwether. What kind of trends are we going to see in this race that may tell us learn some lessons for November? Both sides thought they could win this race. It was actually leaning GOP, and the Democrat ended up winning. Democrats today pointing to that and saying that, look, now that we have the abortion decision coming down from the Supreme Court, it is a different political environment than it was a couple of months ago. They see that as a bellwether and a good indication heading into November. Mitch, we've been talking about this red wave coming in the House. It may be more of a Smaller wave. You're the metaphor guy. What's a red ripple or something like that?
A red ripple.
I don't know.
I think you nailed it. You give me too much credit. Red ripple sounds good to me. It's not a red wave or red ripple instead. Okay, that's Joe Khalil, the metaphor man, reporting from Washington, D.C. Joe, we appreciate your time and your analysis there. Here are a few more stories. Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation in your cable lineup. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-based, unbiased coverage.